And now we continue our series called Mental Health Moments with Rogers Memorial Hospital. Today, important things you may not already know about recovery from mental illness and substance abuse. Sue McKenzie is with the Wisconsin Initiative for Stigma Elimination, and Adrienne O'Neil is a suicide prevention and outreach coordinator. They not only work in the mental health field, but they also both speak from personal experience of their own or a family member. Great to see both of you. Thank you so much. Why an entire month, Sue, dedicated to recovery?
Well, what we know is that across the world, people get the signs and symptoms of illness, but those same people have a hard time describing what recovery is, how they would access recovery. So it's really important for us to shift to talking about recovery and maybe a little less on illness, because it's that hope of recovery that gets people to that place of being able to start to take those steps to move forward. And interestingly, this is not only Recovery Month, but it's Suicide Prevention Week. And what I know from having the opportunity to interview over 300 people who have stories of thinking about suicide or actually attempting it is pretty much the same story. I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to live like this forever. And so important that we get the message of recovery and hope out there.
Yeah, I think that positive message and that people do heal and they do recover is super important. I understand you have a sister who faced the challenges of bipolar disorder, and I think as a family member then you know too the challenges you face in loving someone and caring about someone who's ill like that. Yeah. What did you learn about recovery from your vantage point?
Well, what I learned is recovery is not a one-size-fits-all. It's different for each person. It's very individualized. What I also learned is that support is so important for the individual and also for the family members, because, you know, recovery is a lifelong thing. It's not going to end. So you have to have that support for the, you know, entire span of it. So.
And I think it's hard to love someone with a mental illness because sometimes some of their attitude or the way it presents itself makes them difficult to love at times and hard to like. So I appreciate that. If you could write a book on recovery, looking at it from your perspective, what tips would you give people?
Well, I would say you need to know what your triggers are. You need to know what your non-negotiables are. In order for recovery to happen, you have to have a lifestyle change. Maybe change who you hang out with, what you do, make sure you get enough sleep, different things like that. Really know what you need for you in order to stay in recovery.
What's an example of a non-negotiable? You know, are you talking about for you as someone who supports someone, or are you talking about the person who's in recovery?
I'm talking about the person who's in recovery. So a non-negotiable, maybe if you're dealing with substance abuse, maybe, you know, you aren't going to go into a bar because that would be triggering for you. Or maybe, you know, if you don't get enough sleep, if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, then, you know, something happens or whatever. You need to know what your non-negotiables are so that that doesn't trigger something, and, you know.
We also, though, talked about just as we were waiting to come on about the non-negotiables for family members too. That you also have to have your own boundaries that you mentioned with your sister. Yeah, I'm not going to have conversations with you when you're drunk, and you know, we can talk tomorrow.
And that's hard to do because you want to be supportive and loving, but sometimes you have to have those two. And I like what you say about the fact that if you're in recovery, you're going to have to expect the fact that you're going to have to make changes, and sometimes that can be really hard. It sounds like a lot of work to recover. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. So I'm sure it's important to point out the joyful moments.
Right, exactly. And there are two P's that I try to remember. One is not so good and one is great. So the not so good is perfection. That for both family members and for the person that is going through the recovery, working on their own life. If we think that, for instance, if I had a mental illness or addiction that caused some problems, I might try to live my life making up for the problems of my past. We can't do that. It's not possible. And so giving up that sense of I have to perfect my past and even be perfect in my present doesn't work. Humans aren't perfect. So getting that under our own ability to think about that and apply it. But then the second P is peers. That what we're finding is it's so important to find someone who's faced some of your same struggles the person living in recovery as well as the family member to be able to have someone to kind of boost each other up as they move forward.
I think that's very hopeful and I would think important in the recovery process. If people are watching right now and they want to move to a more hopeful place around some of these issues, what can they do? Because I think people are experiencing substance abuse feel hopeless, and I think sometimes people who are in the trenches of experiencing mental illness or trying to love someone or help someone, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So Adrienne and I are both a part of an organization called WISE, and what we do is help individuals, organizations, everything from maybe a local congregation to a whole county, where we go in and work with them to understand how to move people towards believing in inclusion and solidarity and hope. And if we can get communities and individuals to move in that direction, we're going to make a big change. And so there's actually research behind it. There's a model that we use, and we help people to understand and implement in their families and their organizations and communities. We're both wearing these.
I saw the green armbands.
These bandanas. And these are actually, they're not for any one organization. We've actually given out 15,000 so far, and we will give out thousands more. It says, "Me Too, a story of hope." And it's just a way to create curiosity to get us to be able to tell those hopeful stories, because unless we're asked, we're not going to run around broadcasting them. So it's kind of a cool way for people to say, what's that about? And then you can share a story
and ask
of hope.
and learn more. I think it's wonderful, and we have several websites we want to share now as a resource to you and someone that you love, starting with the stories of people who have faced mental illness and have experienced recovery and hope. You can visit rogersinhealth.org. There's also the website WISE. It's wisewisconsin.org. That's where you can learn more about the organization that Sue just mentioned. You can also find out about unique paths to recovery at that rogersinhealth.org website that we mentioned. And then for resources on mental health as well as suicide prevention, because again, this is Suicide Prevention Week, you can go to mhawisconsin.org, and that stands for Mental Health America. Wisconsin is the local chapter.org. Ladies, thank you both so much. I appreciate
Thank you so much for
your time.
having us.